Welcome back to Next Gen Console Watch, our show following all the news and rumors on the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. I'm Daemon Hatfield, and as always, I'm joined by Ryan McCaffrey, host of IGN's Xbox podcast, Podcast Unlocked.
Good to see you, Daemon.
You as well. This week, we're joined by Mark Medina, a regular feature on our PlayStation podcast, Podcast Beyond.
Hello, good to digitally see Daemon and Ryan McCaffrey in real life. It's weird.
Yes.
Hi.
These two are actually sitting right next to each other, I believe.
I was
there they are. Lots to talk about this week. Our IGN's executive editor of tech, Beaumore, has actually got his hands on PlayStation VR 2. But first, our big topic this week is it's more of an existential question in regards to Xbox and PlayStation, Activision, and the future of Call of Duty. Of course, Microsoft is in the process of attempting to acquire Activision. Just one of the gaming properties that would earn them is Call of Duty. And the big question is, what does that mean for the future of Call of Duty? Are PlayStation players going to be able to continue playing Call of Duty games, future Call of Duty games on their PlayStation consoles? So recently, Xbox boss Phil Spencer said that new Call of Duty games are going to remain on PlayStation platforms for, quote, at least several more years after Activision's current contract with Sony expires. But PlayStation CEO Jim Ryan finds that offer, quote, inadequate. Jim Ryan's full quote to GamesIndustry.biz is, Microsoft has only offered for Call of Duty to remain on PlayStation for 3 years after the current agreement between Activision and Sony ends. After almost 20 years of Call of Duty on PlayStation, their proposal was inadequate on many levels and failed to take account of the impact on our gamers. We want to guarantee PlayStation gamers continue to have the highest quality Call of Duty experience, and Microsoft's proposal undermines this principle. So the question that brings to my mind, Ryan, is what obligation does Xbox have to PlayStation gamers?
Well, they paid $69 billion, so they have their obligation is to Microsoft shareholders. That's really it. And the company's goals are to grow the number of users in the Xbox ecosystem, the primary means of which clearly seems to be Game Pass subscribers these days. And so Microsoft's going to do whatever they think is going to best achieve that goal. Maybe that is keeping it on PlayStation for longer, and they're going to just draw a bunch more people into Game Pass anyway. Or maybe it's going to be to take it off of PlayStation after some amount of time and to go ahead and say, hey, you got to come over to our ecosystem, either PC or console, in order to do this. That's really it at the end of the day. When you are spending $69 billion, you get to write the rules as long as the government doesn't come and slap you on the wrist and tell you no, which that is the part we're still waiting on.
Yep. Sure. Mark, what was your take on Jim Ryan's comments?
I think it's hilarious to see CEOs like airing out dirty laundry like this. I love it. Going back and forth. I think as far as like what obligation do they have to PlayStation gamers? None. Right. But as you said, shareholders and stuff like that. I'm reminded of, when we're in a generation right now where it's like Xbox One and PS4. Eventually, Microsoft and PlayStation are going to want those people to move to Series X and PS5, and they have to decide when is the right time to do that. And that's kind of happening right now, I think, with Xbox, is they have to choose, do we want to rip away? Call of Duty sells better on PlayStation, right? Like, we know that. So they have to decide, is it more financially viable for us to take that away and make it exclusive and tell people you have to be in our ecosystem, or they're going to lose all of those players if they do that. They have to kind of like balance that. I'm thinking of Minecraft, right? Minecraft, they could have gone exclusive, but they decided that's a lot of PlayStation players that we'd be losing if we did that. So we're not going to do that. So as far as like obligations, none. But I think if they have crunched the numbers and thought, hey, we're actually going to lose money by ripping it away from PlayStation, maybe that's not great, right? Because, Jonathan Casual over there, he doesn't know that in 2027, he might not be able to play Call of Duty on PlayStation anymore. So he's going to see this great E3 presentation or wherever it's shown, and he's going to see the new Call of Duty, and he's not going to understand why he can't play it. Is he immediately just going to go buy an Xbox for Call of Duty? Maybe not. So now they've lost that player.
Well, there's such a big difference between Minecraft and Call of Duty. Minecraft is a cross-platform sandbox, all ages experience. It makes sense to keep that as open as it can possibly be. Call of Duty is the best-selling AAA game every single year, and there's not necessarily as much of a sort of creative reason to keep it on like in terms of serving your players, to keep it on PlayStation if you decide you're better serving your business by trying to bring those people over to the Xbox ecosystem. That way. And it's a little rich coming from Jim. This is a guy who, what about the 15 years of Street Fighter history on Xbox when Jim signed an exclusivity deal and Street Fighter V never saw the light of day on Xbox? What about years of Final Fantasy on Xbox? When now you've got Final Fantasy, the next Final Fantasy is going to be a PlayStation exclusive. So I don't think Jim came off super great here in terms of the perception of his comments to the gaming community. Now, ultimately, what we think about it probably doesn't super matter. And then the real, like, the petty part of it was that you're talking about it being hilarious, Mark, that I agree, is when he said, part of the quote, Damon, I don't recall if you read it or not, where he said, oh, well, I wouldn't have said anything about this, but once Phil Spencer made it public, I'm going to, So that part of it was just, that's where it's just like, grab the popcorn and like, here we go. This is core gamer Twitter conversation. This is like a dream come true.
We're watching our dads fight.
It's really, you can't help but laugh a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's pretty one-sided. Like, Phil Spencer is not being, antagonistic about it. He seems to be pretty gracious about the whole thing, considering he might, he's about to probably own Call of Duty, like you said, one of the best-selling gaming franchises of all time. It's got to be really tricky for them, though, right? Like, keeping the messaging, trying to control the narrative so it doesn't spin out of control and everyone talks about how evil and greedy Microsoft is, right? Like they can't let it be the story can't be that they took something away from all these PlayStation gamers. PlayStation gamers' favorite franchise has been ripped out of their hands by Xbox, right? So it's got to be really tricky how they handle this whole thing.
Yeah, number one, yes, it sells great. Call of Duty sells great on PlayStation, but to say the 20 years of Call of Duty on PlayStation, well, in the 360 generation, Microsoft had that deal with Activision, and all the Call of Duty DLC and all the stuff that it got promoted by Xbox so it's just the deal changed, and Sony has that deal now. So it is a little interesting. Now, Damon, I have a little kind of not maybe. I'm definitely reading too far into this, but when Phil says, "Oh, we'll keep it for a few years after the current deal." Well, GamesIndustry.biz, who had sort of broken this quote from Jim Ryan, said that this deal that Activision has with Sony runs for 3 more games, including Modern Warfare 2 this year. Now, we know there isn't a game for the first time in forever next year. They've already said they're taking next year off. So you're looking at 2024 for this deal to expire. And then if Phil says a few or several, like 3 or 4 more years, well, that might, if we look ahead here on next gen console watch, that might just go to the end of this generation. And so Phil's saying, all right, we'll, saying without explicitly saying, because they both know they're going to, the next PlayStation, Xbox are almost certainly going to launch at the same time again, like they have the last couple. So, Phil might be saying, yeah, we'll cover you. We're going to cover you and your audience through PlayStation 5. But when the generation flips to PlayStation 6, well, then those Call of Duty players, when we get that little bit of a reset, you got to come over to Xbox at that point. So that is me 100%. I don't have any insider knowledge. That is me totally reading into this, but I think the timing kind of works out for that theory to maybe have a chance to prove true down the road.
Yeah, and the next generation reset, I think we'll continue to get physical Xboxes to put under our TVs, but that, they're going to have built out their cloud gaming initiative even more. So maybe at that time, it's going to be even more attractive to just get people in the ecosystem, play Call of Duty, stream Call of Duty, just via Xbox on your TV or your Roku stick or whatever method. Mark, anything else you want to add on before we let you go?
before I'm dismissed. Yeah, I'm of that thought that like exclusivity doesn't really help any gamers. You know what I mean? Like I get that. I get the business nature of why they happen. Stealing Call of Duty away is only a bummer to PlayStation gamers that don't have any financial stake in this, right? Just like Starfield or Street Fighter or anything. Like I don't personally, I understand why they happen, but I don't personally revel in the fact that, we just got a state of play that's showing all these like exclusive games. And it's like, Ninja Theory is working, or Team Ninja, sorry, is working on Wolong, which is coming everywhere. But then the Ronin game is only PlayStation. You're just like, that sucks, right? Like, I don't super love exclusivity. So taking Call of Duty away, it's not great, but their businesses, and I understand why it happens.
Well, and I'll add on one other bit of speculation here as well, and that's Phil. I think is being very generous here and saying, "All right, we'll give you a few extra years," because what I interpret him as doing there is saying, "All right, Sony, we're going to give you some time before this thing we bought comes back to us exclusively," and it gives Sony time to spin up something else to try and compete with it. Whether that's maybe they bring SOCOM back, maybe they bring Killzone or Resistance back, or a new IP, something in that military shooter space that Sony can try to fill the void with there a little bit. So, but the reality is, I don't think this is like a console fanboy thing to say. If you look at the moves that Microsoft has been making and the moves that Sony has been making, with Microsoft going onto PC, and you mentioned Minecraft, Mark, of keeping that everywhere. Microsoft's been running a strategy of broadening their base and just not worrying about the box, just worrying about the ecosystem, whereas Jim Ryan's job is to sell as many PlayStation 5s as he can, just like they sold 120 or whatever million PlayStation 4s, a success by absolutely any metric. But Jim has been running a strategy of trying to keep things off of competing platforms, because including PC, that dam has only started to get some cracks in it here very recently, where Sony's started to go, okay, well, looks like we actually can make some money on this PC
still,
thing.
Very delayed,
and it's
right?
way after the fact. So, you look at it, it's really, I don't think the difference could be clearer between the two in terms of Sony is keeping things off of other platforms to get you to come to PlayStation, and Microsoft is saying, well, play wherever you want, just do it in our sandbox, and that's fine.
Yeah, my actual closing thoughts, is that I think we're about to see a different company after 24, right? After Treyarch's game, that's when the marketing deal is gone, right? And then they are agreeing to keep Call of Duty on both, but we know that Call of Duty will come to Game Pass and be full price on PlayStation. And I think once that marketing deal is over, Xbox is giving themselves 3-4 years to get as many people to understand that this is now a Microsoft game. And that's probably when they'll feel more comfortable pulling that metaphorical trigger to be like, and now it's exclusive. You've had 7 years to prepare for this. This is where you can play it now.
Yeah, the question of what happens after these acquisitions are some of the biggest questions that we're going to continue following here at IGN. I think realistically, though, we're not going to have the answers to these questions for years from now. We won't know what will ultimately happen to the future of Call of Duty, probably at least 3 years, according to Phil Spencer. The same questions that we have about Bethesda's games like Fallout and Elder Scrolls 6. We still don't know the answers beyond Starfield, something new. these long-running multi-platform franchises, what's really going to happen to them in the future? I think the answer is still a few ways off. But let's turn our attention to PlayStation VR 2. Mark, always a pleasure. We are now joined by IGN's executive editor of tech, Bo Moore, who has recently spent some time with his hands on PlayStation VR 2. Bo, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Let's get right to it. What was your first impression of PlayStation VR 2? I think you were able to try out a few different games. Is that right?
Yeah, I played 4 games in my demo session. The main one that everybody cares about is Horizon Call of the Mountain, which was very cool. It is a full 6 to 7 hour game, they told me, and it mainly has 2 kind of ways that you're playing. The first is your exploration mode, so you're walking around, exploring, and doing a lot of climbing. So you're going from grip to grip, pulling yourself along these long climbing routes. Tons of verticality. The world was just totally gorgeous. I definitely stopped and just like looked out at these amazing vistas several times. It was just so pretty. The other bit is the combat, and you're sort of on these, it's like a circular arena. So you move your arm to sort of dodge left and right, and then all the combat is bow and arrow with you flinging arrows at these the giant mechanical machines. The other 3 were The Walking Dead Saints and Sinners Chapter 2, Star Wars Tales from the Galaxy's Edge Enhanced Edition, and Resident Evil Village.
And what was your overall impression? Were you impressed?
Yeah, the other 3 also very cool. Just the main thing that PSVR 2 has going for it is it's the highest resolution of the mainstream VR headsets. There is technically HP has one that's slightly higher, but between the Valve Index and the Meta Quest 2, PSVR 2 has a resolution of 2000 by 2024 per eye. So basically you're looking at 4K in the headset. And it also has this thing called foveated rendering. So basically there's eye tracking within the headset itself, and it uses that to give you the best image where your eyes are looking and then save a little bit of processing power around your peripheral vision. And yeah, the visuals were really excellent. Tracking of the controllers, it basically just brought everything up to par with the current gen VR headsets, whereas the first gen PSVR pretty much felt dated even when it came out. It was using the Move controllers, the PlayStation Eye or the PlayStation Camera, whichever it was called, it just kind of felt almost behind the times when it came out. And so it now being 6 years old at this point is definitely out of date. So this really gets you access to that high-end VR experience, but in a simple plug and play solution, just a single cable that you plug into your PS5.
So the first PSVR only had an attach rate of about 5%. Most PS4 owners ignored it. Because of the quality of PSVR 2, do you think it's better set up for success?
I think so. I think VR has matured a lot in the last 6 or so years. You know, we now have, obviously Horizon will be a great launch game for this. Ryan and I have talked about how nothing has been announced, but I really think that Half-Life Alyx will be coming to PSVR 2. It would absolutely surprise me.
How could it not? It's the greatest VR game. I think it's actually the best game, period. It's not best. It's my favorite game of the last 5 years. It's that good, and more people should have access to it. And Valve has supported PlayStation consoles before and PlayStation platforms. So if that thing's not day one to let more people play that game, I'll be stunned.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, thus far, if you wanted to play Half-Life Alyx, you had to have a high-end PC-based VR setup, which a lot of people just simply don't do. And that's why for all its faults, PSVR 1, even at only a 5% attach rate, it was pretty simple to just, you get your headset, you plug it into your console, you don't have to worry about having a PC, having a graphics card that's powerful enough for that. There's any number of reasons why people don't want to get involved with PC VR and all of its headaches. But the Quest has brought so many people into VR because, again, it's just you put it on and you go, and you don't even need any hardware. And so here, Are there going to be people buying a PSVR 2 and a PS5 just for one of these games? No, probably not. But for people who already have a PS5, then yes, I think it will be a lot more of an incentive to just add that on. Will we see higher than 5%? Probably. I think, like, you know, I'm not an analyst, so I can't estimate those numbers.
Well,
but
we also don't know what success looks like for Sony.
Yeah.
And I guess more you'd probably have to ask, like, developer. You need an installed base to get, it's that chicken and egg thing with developers, right? Like, I would argue PSVR, there were some really great games for the PSVR 1, but like you, Bo, like, I lost interest in PSVR 1 pretty quickly. I really loved Batman Arkham VR, which was a fun little, like, 2-hour thing at launch, and there were some good games. I mean, Moss, I reviewed for IGN, loved that game. The second one's out now, too. But yeah, the tech aged so quickly that I stopped caring about that, even though there were still games coming. So yeah, I just hope that's why we want to see games like Alex come to this new platform, and Horizon Call of the Mountain did look great. I watched your video on IGN where you talked extensively about it with Mark Medina, who we just shuffled off the show. And yeah, we need those killer games to bring people in. Damon, I think the big question with this thing, especially as it pertains to the conversation we're having, is price.
Price, exactly. That's one of the big questions that remains about PSVR 2. So, Bo, having used it, would you wager a guess as to what you think it might cost?
So the original PSVR launched at $399, I believe, and then that was, you then had to tack on the cost of the Move controllers and the camera if you didn't already have them, which most people probably didn't already have them. So that was a considerable price point, and that was 6 years ago. The consoles are more expensive now. Like, that was when PS4 was, I believe, a $400, or probably had even already had a price drop to maybe a 3 year.
I don't quite recall, if the PS, I think it was still 400 in 2016, but we'd have to look it up. Our commenters will let us know right now.
For sure. But now we're looking at a $500 PS5, even more than that in some territories from the recent price increase. So with the hardware that's on offer here, I would not be surprised if this comes in at $499. I think if they go higher than that, it's pushing it, but that's where it gets into the how much of a profit are they willing to narrow that profit margin.
I will be shocked if it's less than $499. And I don't say that with any joy, by the way. Like, I would love for them to come in and just say, yeah, it's $399 again, even though it's way better. Like, come on in. We want more people in VR. Because, you know, obviously Microsoft has decided that is not a battle we want to fight on the console side. Microsoft is not invested. They're not supporting VR. I'm really disappointed by that as IGN's Xbox guy and an Xbox gamer, because I do play VR at home, and I'm very lucky that I'm able to grab the Valve Index from IGN's office and take it home and play stuff like Half-Life Alyx and all the great, Walking Dead Saints and Sinners is an awesome game too. I'm a big fan of that one. And these games, if Microsoft would get in, that would only help. I think that would be a rising tide lifts all boats kind of scenario. So I applaud the heck out of Sony for continuing to fight the fight with VR. And so I'm really rooting for PSVR to succeed. But that said, Bo, based on everything you've said about the tech specs of this thing, you haven't even touched on the moves are, thank goodness, out the window. And we've got much more modern, Rift style.
Yeah, the Rift style controllers. They're almost even at the level of Index controllers. They do have finger tracking, but I didn't find it to be quite as accurate as on the Index. It's there, but honestly, the biggest difference is that on the Index controllers, there's a strap across the back so that you can feel fully comfortable to open your hand and not drop the controller. Whereas on this one, there's no strap there, so you're still kind of gripping it a little bit at all times.
An unpleasant surprise given the PSVR 1 and from everything else you've said about PSVR 2 and your coverage on IGN, Sony has been nailing the ergonomics of their VR platform. So that seems like a weird oversight. But yeah, to finish my point earlier, that's taking all of that into account, the high resolution on the headset. You said there was like no screen door effect.
Yeah, none at all.
The new controllers. I would be shocked if it's less than $499. I would pay $499 based on what you've said, based on your impression. But I hope they say, let's go for it and do $399. But considering the Quest 2 just got a price increase from $299 to $399, there's just no reasonable expectation for the PSVR 2 to also be $399 or even $449. I think $499 is the floor on this thing.
Yeah, you have to keep in mind that the index, the current barometer for a high-end PC VR headset is, I believe, $800 or even up to $1,000.
It wasn't $1,000
if you include the base stations and the controller.
Yeah.
Like the headset alone, I believe, is $800, and so that's not including controllers, not including the base stations. $1,200, I think, is what the full bundle to get in the door, and then that's not including the cost of a PC, which we're not really including that because obviously the PS5 is a separate cost anyway. But yeah, like that's all that to then get that on PSVR. Yeah, 500 seem. I feel like 500 would almost be a steal.
I'm just so happy to hear that everything looked great, played great, and felt great. That it's the way your words were. This feels like a modern, PC caliber VR experience, and that's a huge win. I mean, PlayStation gamers that have never played any PC VR, that have a PSVR 1 that upgraded this thing with their PS5, they're going to see one hell of a leap from PS4 and PSVR 1 to PS5 and PSVR 2. And that's hopefully just going to get more people excited about VR.
Yeah.
Yeah, regardless of what it ends up being what it ends up costing, at least it should be encouraging that Bo's time with the PSVR 2 was positive and he was impressed by the technology. I think that'll be good word to hear for people who are looking forward to it. Before we go, we have the results of last week's poll. We asked, what potential single-player DLC expansion would you most like to see? And perhaps unsurprisingly, the winner is the breakaway hit of 2022 so far. Elden Ring is the winner with almost half of the votes going to that. But Ryan, Halo Infinite was in there. 17% of the votes went to Halo Infinite, wanting to see single-player DLC expansion for that. Have you got your fingers crossed for that?
No, they just had a studio shakeup. They're having we just did a whole Unlocked about this. I mean, I voted for it in the poll because I do want to see some single player DLC for this game that's in this, new kind of infinite sandbox, the Zeta Halo sandbox. But I don't begrudge anybody who voted to that they want to see more of Elden Ring. I mean, it's the absolute front runner for Game of the Year at the moment, with next big candidate God of War being, we haven't played it yet. We'll see. But if the votes were tallied today, I think it would be quite the landslide. So yeah, not a surprise that Elden Ring's the winner in that poll.
Yeah, it will be very interesting to see what happens because recency bias is a thing. A poll for you to vote on for next episode. We want to know, how long should Xbox keep Call of Duty on PlayStation? For the 3 years that Phil said, or should they be more generous? 5 years, 10 years, or indefinitely? Should it never leave the PlayStation? Make sure to vote at IGN.com. We'll share the results with you next week. That's going to do it for this edition of Next Gen Console Watch. Thank you to both Ryan and Bo. Thank you to everyone working behind the scenes here to make this episode possible. My name is Damon. We'll be back next week, 6 a.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. Eastern, with more PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X news. We'll see you then.